My name is Emmett Douglas. This is Blindside Sports, and welcome back to another episode. Today's episode I'm very excited for because this is probably the hardest man to get into contact with at Fox Sports Radio. So, shout out Chris Perfett, technical producer, been on the show a couple times before, host of Pride of Detroit, for getting me the connections to the great Steve Desaegher. This is a guy who, when the network shuts down, apparently we hear a taped Steve Desaegher update. And, we got to blame Bob Guerra, wrong button Bob, for that. Steve, it's an honor to have you on Blindside Sports, man. How you been?
Doing okay. It's been pretty busy over there.
Yeah, so you've been at FSR a while, and, just this interview is very kind of special to me as a person because I am 18 years old right now. I started listening to FSR from the affiliate Sports Radio, Sports Radio KJR in Seattle when I was 8 years old. And I believe it was you were doing your Saturday, Sunday night, your same shift now. And it was Mike North. That's when I heard you back when Mike North was on Saturdays. And you've been
Chicago.
You and Ilo, you were talking about him pre-show. You and Ilo have been the update guys, and K-Fig too, that I've been, listening to on the weekends for years now. So this one's very honored to have Steve on. So the first question I have to ask you here is, how'd you get started at FSR? How did that, all go down? Because I know you've been all over the place in your media career, very decorated Steve Desaegher.
Well, I had been working as an anchor in local sports LA radio, and I had known Ben Maller for years and years. I used to sit with Ben, who, of course, is now FSR overnight host. I had sat next to Ben in press boxes for many years when we both lived in Orange County, Angels, Ducks games. And even when I was working in the local LA station, he would say, "Hey, I work at Fox Sports Radio now. You ought to come work at Fox." Well, eventually, and this is what happens in media jobs, the place gets sold. Most people get laid off. Something happens. And that's what happened to where I was working, 15 plus years ago. And he said, "You should talk to," and he gave me the name of the guy who was in charge of all the anchors at the time. So I got him a tape. I got a tryout, and I've been at Fox Sports Radio ever since. But guys like Eddie Garcia and Ben Maller were already there. They predate me.
Yep. I mean, Eddie's been there 20 years. I know Ben, he has that joke where he's gone for 6 months and 28 days or whatever. So technically Eddie's been there longer. So what year did you get hired at Fox exactly?
It was 06 maybe.
06? All right. Now, you've been on this weekend shift, and now you're kind of full time. You work with the Odd Couple and Jay and Mike, and you do that. But you've been working with Arnie Spanier, the great Arnie Spanier, for a long time now. Yeah. All right, and Arnie's done a lot of funny, or depend how your sense of humor is, questionable things on air. What is your favorite Arnie Spanier moment?
Oh man, it's a long list, and you can just add to it. What was recently added to it was when somebody found a clip of him attempting to karaoke, and that's been played on the air in the past week.
That was great.
Wow. As I've said to Rob Parker of the Odd Couple, why is it the people that can sing the least want to sing the most? Arnie would qualify as that.
My grandpa's one of those too. It's always better when they're not the best singers. I feel like it's almost better when they're not good because just hearing Arnie talk, he doesn't have the singing talents.
No, and of course he's got the gruff speaking voice, and it's doubly worse as the singing voice. But Arnie, as I mentioned to you pre-show, is kind of hard not to like. You just kind of roll with it.
Exactly. As we knocked on the mic there. But yeah, Arnie's awesome, and Chris Plank is also fun. I mean, you guys.
Oh yeah.
You guys get into our trolling arguments every Sunday night because my Dolphins are in the Super Bowl. Chris.
Arnie, yeah.
Yeah,
Chris Plank is an excellent radio host, and he's kind of the perfect complement to Arnie that those two host together on Sunday nights and have for years now, because you get a dose of reality that you really need for any show from Chris. And you get an entertainment value as well as sometimes information from Arnie. It's a good mix.
Yeah. I mean, and so there's times where Arnie, like you said, does find something that we didn't know. And, obviously one of the biggest Arnie jokes is, when you guys are watching a big game like the Super Bowl and,
Final Four.
Yep. And, that was great.
His TV will be a few seconds ahead of ours in the studio. He'll react first, but last night I did notice that when we were watching NBA play in, that our TV was ahead of his for some reason. For the
Finally,
first
it's
time
about
I can
time.
recall.
Finally, man. I mean, gosh, that dude always ruins it for you guys. I mean, I know Chris Perfett and Bo Benson, who produced the Super Bowl show, were all over Twitter making jokes about Arnie ruining the game by, because he was 10 seconds ahead. But I mean, it could be good for, people and like you who are driving in their car, but for someone like you guys and Chris who are watching the game, I mean, it's not good. I mean, Arnie, what are you talking about? And then 10 seconds later, you see Patrick Mahomes throwing a touchdown to Kadarius Toney or something crazy like that. So
it would be good if he were better at the actual play-by-play, which you can't. If you don't have the rights of it, you literally can't do that live on the air, just on any random show. So in that way, we're all safe because he's not actually play-by-play.
That's all you hear.
Yeah, he just reacts or yells or what happened. But you're talking to a guy who sits at an information desk. So to me, whether I'm the first to find out or not, it doesn't matter. As long as the information gets out there accurately, great.
Yeah. So let's go over to the next FSR question here, Steve. Emmett Douglas, Steve Desaegher, get me on Twitter at EmmettNoC04. Steve, you've been at FSR for 17 years now, and since 06, you've done a lot of updates. That you're the king of working the holidays. So you've probably had a lot of hurdles to jump through. What's been the craziest thing that's happened behind the scenes at your time at FSR?
I don't think I was there when the network went off the air. You made the reference to Rob. Otherwise, that would be it, certainly. It's usually more mundane, run-of-the-mill things like, if we don't, some people are sick or on vacation or something like that. There was a time when we just literally didn't have another anchor person to take over for me when my shift ended at night, and then I had to just record the next 4 hours of updates because there were no new games. So as long as nothing breaking news happened, we were fine. But a baseball game, this is back when baseball games used to go longer, I had to wait for the actual 10th or 12th inning or whatever it was to finish before I could leave the building.
Hey, at least you weren't there and you had to wait for the Mariners game when it went to 18 innings against the Astros. That'd be a whole nother shift.
I did go to a Dodgers game once that went 18 innings. However, it was a day game. It was one of the Fox Saturday afternoon games. Dodgers tied it in the ninth against the Braves. Eventually, it went 18. And then that same week, the coming week, I went to a Dodger home game that was 14 or 15 innings. So 2 extras, long ones, in the same week at one point.
Now, so a couple of years ago, you and Jonas Knox and Rob Parker were on together. And Rob was at a Dodgers game. And I know this story, but I'm sure a lot of people don't. Give us a Parker. I ain't paying for that story. Exactly. It's so great.
Rob has, first off, to set the scene, he has a fair amount of cash at this point because he does a lot of work. He's got a full-time radio gig, and in addition to TV appearances in the past and all of that.
Yep.
But he really loves to save a buck sometimes. I mean, once he went to a fast food place, and he started questioning the bill with the minimum wage worker at the
over a 12-cent raise of the Diet Coke.
Went up.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, at the 2017 World Series it was, which I happened to cover, and Ben as well, and Rob Parker, being a longtime baseball writer, was there. There were so many people that were covering it that the Dodgers used the cafeteria, which is normally a sit-down to eat place for the media, used it as more workspace. And so nobody could sit down to eat during the entire series there. So what they did to compensate is when you, as a media member, entered the stadium, they would give you a voucher for, say, $15 at any concession stand.
Which is probably like a bottle of water.
And you can buy your nachos or, a couple of dogs or whatever. So Rob did that. And he went to the counter, and I think it was Ben who told me this originally, that whatever Rob ordered exceeded the $15 credit that he had. So he was going to have to shell out the extra $2 or whatever it was. And all you could hear, he said, from Rob was at the counter telling the worker, I ain't paying for that. like he wanted to keep the bill under $15. That way he got all the food for free.
Yeah, that's a very typical Rob. I mean, you mentioned it. I actually had I think it was Brandon Trufa on a couple weeks ago, producer. We were talking about that too, when he had the 12-cent Diet Coke Coke raise with Jonas Knox at the El Pollo Loco by the studio. I mean,
Yes. I will say about Rob Parker, though, that off the air and with no publicity, he has given a lot of us anchors, me included, gift cards for Christmas when most hosts do not do that. So Rob has been very generous.
You know about the lotto scratchers with Jonas, right? Back when you used
yes,
to work
I have won on those. He has given lotto tickets for Christmas before to fellow employees.
Yep. Who actually, you probably might not know, but I think it might have been, no, I think it was either Lita Lapp or Eddie Garcia won a pretty, something pretty good last year off Jonas.
Oh, my I think high in winnings was just over $20, I think, which was a very nice Christmas gift.
That's a couple Dodger dogs, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, real quickly, kind of off topic, you're mentioning the prices at, Dodger Stadium. I was at a Seattle Sea Dragons XFL game a couple weeks ago. I want you to guess the number or the dollar amount I paid for 2 Powerades for me and my friend.
Oh, wow.
Powerades.
Okay, so it's just like the equivalent of a large drink, right?
Yeah, but in a bottle, like a Powerade.
Okay. 8 each?
$1 off, 7 each.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not exactly the grocery store.
No, I can get like 7 at the local store by my house for $7. I mean, if you go right now, or if you go right on, the right deal, but.
We heard with the Masters last weekend, it comes up again that for all the incredible amount of money that goes through that place, it's a private country club. When they do open it to the public to attend the Masters, one of the toughest tickets in sports, that the concession prices are actually quite low.
I mean, hey, that's probably why people like the Masters. You probably go and these older golf dads.
You don't get gouged because, as we know, as I've mentioned on the air before, the Masters has so much money. They really don't care. When they had people protesting the Masters and saying, hey, we're going to boycott your sponsors, the Masters' response was, fine, we'll just show all the golf all weekend long with no commercials. Now what are you going to do? And they did that one year. No commercial breaks at all.
Yep. I mean, the Masters doesn't care. They're just there to have the good time and do all that. But why don't we dive over to the Los Angeles Chargers? I don't know why I went San Diego there. But
old habits die hard.
Exactly. I've done that before either. That's the weird part. Maybe it's because I've heard you say San Diego Chargers and go Chargers and all those drops back in the day. But
Governor Schwarzenegger said that.
Yeah. So why don't we dive into the Chargers? You guys hired Kellen Moore as your offensive coordinator
in Dallas.
Yep. So what are your expectations for the Chargers this season?
If there's health, this is a good team. This should be a playoff team every year if there's health. They even struggled with some health and still made the playoffs last year. With the coaching moves,
they were the 32nd most injured team last year, Steve. Just so you know, they're the most injured team.
Yeah, well, I believe that. We'll start with the wide receiver core. But they've had 2 years with Brandon Staley as head coach. And what stuns and disappoints me is that he is still going to be calling the plays for the defense. The reason he got the job in the first place was because he was defensive coordinator of the top-ranked defense with the Rams. And yet the Chargers defense in his 2 years there calling plays has been bottom 5 against the run both years. Something needs to change there. Until they can change that, their performance against the run, getting stops, it's hard to take them seriously. And how did they lose the playoff game? They blew a lead because they couldn't get stops against Jacksonville.
Yeah, with 5 turnovers by Trevor Lawrence, 4 picks and a fumble. It was definitely
that should be yours. That game should have been yours.
Yeah, it was bad. So, my thing too, and you mentioned Brandon Staley, is if the Chargers don't do anything next year, you can't help but to move on from Brandon Staley. I mean, you could have argued, and I even think it should have happened this year. I mean, he's done all these BS, and you talk about it every week with Arnie and Plague, all these dumb, just 4th down calls that, why would you go for it? I mean, I remember one of the dumbest Staley moments was last year, the 2021 season on Thursday Night Football. They're playing the Chiefs.
Yeah,
he went for it 4 times in field goal range. It cost him
lost in overtime.
Yes.
Now, I will say that, and I do always say this as well regarding that, you have to get both sides of the coin. Earlier in that season, they won at Kansas City because he went for it.
Yep,
I do believe the coach's decision cost them the home game against Kansas City. At the same time, they did win on the road that year against KC.
Exactly. So, I mean, I guess it's all equal. And I think Kellen Moore could really bring out Justin Herbert. I mean, Joe Lombardi definitely wasn't calling the right plays for Herbert and all of that. And my next question here is, if you're the Chargers, what are you going to do with Austin Eckler? Do you trade him? Do you pay?
You've kind of painted yourself into the corner because he is so upset about his contract situation. I do think that's more a condition of the NFL in general, not valuing running backs. Eckler happens to be a running back. The Chargers on the ground, a lot of games weren't good. They could still move the ball, though, some, because Eckler's so good in receiving out of the backfield. They need to have him still as part of this offense, not only because he's a touchdown maker. He's been superb in that department the last 2-3 years. But even when there's no ground game, he can still get you something on swing passes.
Yeah, and the argument too that people have with Eckler is that he's 28 years old. He's getting on the wrong side of age for the running back. And you got people like Bijan Robinson in the draft this year that you guys could pick up. So it all could work out, that way. And I think Bijan Robinson could be better than Austin Eckler. But it's a kind of question of, will Bijan really fall that, like, what do you got, the 20th pick or something?
Yeah, playoff team. They'd be about the bottom 10 of the first round. I will say that this front office has been largely superb with the draft. Not just okay, but really, really good. They've had a lot of hits year after year, Derwin James, et cetera. And so I do have a lot of confidence in who they will bring in draft-wise.
Yep. I do too. I mean, that's the thing that you have to, give to the Chargers is every year, whether it be draft, whether it be free agency, they're always bringing in the right guys for Justin Herbert. I mean, like the past couple of years, they've been bolstering that offensive line, bolstering the defense. I mean, you drafted Rashawn Slater a couple of years ago in the draft. Last year, and Kenneth Murray also is good. I mean, they are putting every right player for Herbert to win in Herbert's in his arsenal. But I think the biggest challenge for the Chargers is that division. You got the Chiefs, who are the Chiefs, obviously. You got the Broncos, who are they really going to be bad again? I mean, will Sean Payton bring them the success that they need? And I think the Raiders are going to be the worst team in that division this year. I think, Jimmy G wasn't really an upgrade, and you lost Darren Waller. So I think there's definitely, a lot of work for the Chargers to do if they want to win that division, but it's definitely doable.
It was a little surprising the AFC West wasn't as good last year as we expected it to be. There were the name quarterbacks, and yet Denver specifically, my goodness, that was just shockingly bad. I went to that Christmas game where Denver gave up over 50 points to the Rams. It was just, I didn't see that kind of year coming, but new coach, new ownership.
No, and then Nathaniel Hackett just was terrible, even going back to the first game. It was not good.
There are a lot of examples of people who have been great coordinators, but not necessarily great head coaches. The Chargers had Norv Turner, that I think was a good hire at the time because Marty Schottenheimer could only get the team so far. And then they brought in Norv Turner, and then they actually started to win playoff games. But you don't think, who are among the best coaches in team history? You don't think of Norv Turner. But as an offensive coordinator, ask Troy Aikman or anybody who's worked with him. He's been one of the best coordinators of the last 30 years in the NFL. Not everybody is cut out to be head coach. Vic Fangio very much earned, after all his years as a great defensive coordinator, earned the right to be a head coach in this league. It just didn't work out.
Yep. I mean, that's just sports. I mean, sometimes it's just the way the pie folds, Me being a Seahawks fan, it's great because we get that top 5 pick, and it's funny because people were like, "Oh, the Seahawks are gonna have the top 5 pick, probably get around the 20th pick from the Broncos," and it's reversed.
Yeah, that was that way for 2 or 3 teams looking at the draft of how people either traded up or traded a star player, and you never know, especially in the NFL, because it's astounding to me still that pretty much every year there's a team that goes from last to first. To try and predict NFL games, or certainly to try and predict the standings, it's a fool's errand. When we talk about, and it's more common in sports talk radio, talking about predictions of games or the odds or things like that, I do sometimes during an NFL season think, who are these people that are actually gambling on the NFL? It's just a small margin of error. A game could go one way or another based on a tiny thing. It's just that just seems to me too often the equivalent of taking your money, walking up to the roof, and just throwing it off.
if you got the money, why not? Why not? Then again,
like Rob Parker.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, like Rob's he's the most interesting guy with his money. I mean, this is a guy who spends $100 plus on Jordans, and I ain't paying for that. So,
but I repeat, Rob's a good guy. And by the way, he's
one of the nicest dudes in radio. From everyone I've had on,
he's a guy about giving back. He has had a teacher's job with a journalism class at USC, and specifically not to make a name for himself, but to teach other people, to help them along. It's great.
And Chris Perfett, another shout out. He actually took that class with Rob Parker. So, I mean, Martin Weiss, I believe, was in that class too, or Martin knows Rob Parker from Detroit, but I think Martin might have either stepped in for Rob or taken that class.
And co-hosts on Saturdays.
Yep, with VJ Husky, 4 to 7 Pacific, great show. VJ, VJ is one of the most helpful guys I've had in kind of my podcast career. I mean,
good.
VJ is awesome. I mean, I can't say any bad things about VJ, but besides some of his questionable takes. But hey, we all have that. I mean,
well, that gets us full circle back to Arnie. If you want to talk about questionable takes,
it's a different question.
Reactions.
It's a different questionable. But VJ, the thing is, I'll give VJ is he has these very long, thought out takes that are he hits on most of them.
I do like that, and this is the case in sports radio in general. People have to have a viewpoint. People have to come from somewhere. And as long as it's legitimate, I'm fine with that. I think over time, you can tell with various places and stations for whom it's just an act and for whom it's a well thought out vibe that they're passing along.
Exactly.
It's their own personal thoughts.
I mean, sports TV, that's kind of my issue with it now is it's like.
Yes, it's a legitimate one.
And it's like, I feel like First Things First with Brew and Nick Wright, those guys are legit. I don't know about Kevin Wildes, but we'll leave that alone. But like a lot like Undisputed, I feel like it's just all right. Skip and Shannon, let's just make each other the most mad. All right, like that's kind of the goal of that.
There's part of 24-hour sports in general where you need to create content and programming and try to grab people. And to me, I'm just speaking for me as a viewer or a listener, it doesn't grab me if you're not being authentic. You've lost me.
Exactly, because I'm like, really, what does this guy really believe? Like it comes down to all that. Because like a lot of these guys I'm like, do they really believe that? And I mean, some of them, it's a shtick, but like it's just like I agree. I like real, authentic sports talk.
Yeah, I don't tune in for pro wrestling. I want actual, nothing scripted. I want the real thing.
The one that I like the most is for pro wrestling is Jonas's old segment on the overnights pro wrestler porn star. That was when pro wrestling.
There are some guys that are really into pro. Mike Harmon is another one with the weeknights that really knows, or you could tell was really, especially in the '80s, really into pro wrestling. I never have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get it either, man. I really don't.
And yet, when the Ram Stadium hosted the recent WrestleMania, I mean, it was getting stories on the local news. It got obviously the 70,000 people and screaming crowd there. It's just it's appropriately WWE, the entertainment value. People buy in.
Yep, exactly. I mean, Mike Harmon was there for WrestleMania. So speaking of Mike Harmon, I mean,
yeah, that is kind of. For maybe it takes you back to your youth, like a lot of things.
Yeah. Emmett Douglas, Steve Desaegher, Blindside Sports. Coming to you on the Blindside Sports YouTube. Get me on Twitter at EmmettNoC04 and make sure to leave a like on the stream, comment. You can tweet into me if you have any questions. Now, Steve, what are your expectations for the Dodgers this year? You're a big Dodgers guy. I think you cover them. You're a Dodgers fan.
Yeah, I expect them to be in the playoffs first and foremost, and I don't think that's a very high bar. This is still, despite people they're missing, this is still a good enough team. I do think that it might be, in a strange way, a good thing that it's going to be a different type of season than the last couple of years for them. They're not going to be winning 100, 107 games and then twiddling their thumbs the last 2 weeks of the regular season and thinking they can just turn it on for the playoffs. I do remember in 2018, the Dodgers had a terrible start to the season and wound up in a tie for first by the end of the season, won a one-game playoff, and made a run all the way to the World Series. They were just on. The pedal was to the metal. So maybe this year will be different than the last couple because, let's be honest, this isn't a 107 win roster that they've got this year.
Yeah. It's not good. And then like obviously there's kind of a whole thing last year with Dave Roberts in the playoffs and all his choking. So
and it's the front office. I can't emphasize this enough. The managers these days, Dave Roberts included, things are done in consort with the front office, not just player acquisition, but analytics really does have a sway. And I'm not saying it shouldn't have a sway, but once you get to, like when the Dodgers really started making postseason runs in 2017, pitcher Rich Hill would be throwing well, and literally after 4 1/3 innings, he'd be pulled because they didn't want him to go through the lineup a third time against the opposition. That was, I believe, the front office entirely deciding that beforehand, and the manager just executing their will. So Dave Roberts has taken some hits, some legitimate, some should be shared with the front office.
Yep, exactly. I mean, there's definitely, a couple pieces of the blame pie to be tossed around there for the Dodgers and, their kind of outage in the postseason last year. Are you a pitch clock guy?
I love the new rule changes. I really do, because we didn't change the game of baseball itself. They didn't change how many balls for a walk or how many strikes for a strikeout. They literally just took out the dead periods when no baseball was happening.
Yep.
So it's a more compact game. It's still the same game I love, and it's done in less time with more action, more steals. I love all of it and how it's worked out so quickly.
Exactly. I mean, I was kind of like iffy on it at first, but it comes down to, all right, no one really wants to sit through 3.5 hour long MLB game. So I think shortening it was kind of what the MLB had to do for their ratings and all that. So I think they definitely a smart move. I mean, yeah, it's definitely affecting the pitchers sometimes, and it's a getting used to period.
Yeah.
But I feel like now most of them are used to it. So I think it's definitely good for the sport because they need ratings.
Yeah, and the first Fox Saturday game got over 2 million viewers, which is great for regular season baseball. I mean, regular season NBA usually does not get that type of number. So they got off to a good start. I will say, I heard one analyst this past week saying it's amazing that the analytics, which I repeat, are a good thing to have, they just can't be everything in decision making, that the analytics, for all its specificity and all the targeted stats, it actually made the game more boring. And so by taking out the defensive shift in the infield, for example, it's opened up the game a little bit and made it more exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And interesting fact on the NBA, I might have heard this from you actually. So, but the ratings for actually selling out and going to the games are at an all-time high.
Yeah. Average attendance was 18,000 this past year in the NBA.
Sellouts too.
Yeah. So to me, why that was a valuable stat, it wasn't just total attendance. There are more teams now than there were decades ago. Even the average attendance is more now for the NBA. But you can't get around the fact that in the regular season, people just don't pay attention as far as watching actual games of the NBA compared to what they used to. And now that the NFL is going to try, and they should, try and take over Christmas because they're the gorilla in the room. The NBA had owned Christmas for how many years?
Oh, yeah.
And they'll still have Christmas games, but they won't dominate the ratings like they used to because the NFL could put literally any team on Christmas and get at least 15 million viewers.
Exactly.
And there won't be an NBA game that gets 15 million on Christmas.
No, you're right on there. Emmett Douglas, Steve Desaegher, and one more question, Steve. What's been your what's been your favorite time, your favorite on-air moment at FSR?
It might be cheesy, but it's not really one moment. It's just any moment where something exciting in sports is happening, where it's the reason we all love sports. Something's live, something amazing is happening. It could be, something wonderful at the Final Four or a Super Bowl or some turn of events in a live game, and you're actually there during your shift at the studio talking about it live. It's part of the reason why we get into the business. I obviously watch games at home when I'm not working. It's not at all the same.
No.
If, for example, if you're working that night and your team is losing, you don't take it as hard because there's so many things to do at work and you're just busy with other stuff and staying locked in and focused on the actual job. But then there's that moment when something crazy or wonderful happens, and it's the reason why we all love sports. And
Exactly.
to be around it in this way vocationally is just very rewarding.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that you're very, very fortunate. I mean, you just deliver scores and, talk to Rob Parker, for your shift, or Arnie. So, I mean, it's definitely a good job. Definitely something awesome. I mean, I feel like also just being on the air, being that guy who delivers, like, it wasn't you when, like LeBron broke the scoring record, like being that guy to deliver such big news to, someone who's driving home from work, maybe, who can't watch the game, and just turns on, the network and hears, such a big story from, an update. Like, it's a lasting
happened
impact.
to me last week. Somebody said that he was out of town. He wanted to watch San Diego State in the Final Four, and he couldn't find a video feed. And he found an audio feed, which happened to be us. And he heard me right after the Aztecs hit the winning shot. So exactly what you're talking about, somebody told me happened literally about a week or two ago.
Wow, exactly. I mean, it's probably very rewarding, to have that happen. But Steve, thank you for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and best of luck to you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I mean, you might be the guy bring on to talk Chargers or Dodgers, from now on, if it's a big story. So appreciate you coming on, man. You can't really shit. You don't got social media, but if you just search Blindside Sports on YouTube and you'll find the episode. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, share it, comment, do whatever you gotta do. This has been Emmett Douglas and Steve Desaegher. See ya. Thank you, Steve.